We are today in such a backdrop. A power trade agreement between India and Nepal, I think, is our requirement rather than our neighbors. So the issue, I think, is not whether we should do or not, we should not do it. The issue is how best we can tailor the PTA agreement so that is beneficial for both countries. I now would like to call upon Vishal Thapaji, uh, who is Vice Chairman of EDC and working with Lotus Energy. He has comprehensive knowledge and experience, and of course, a lot of regional and international insights on the various development issues. And he has worked with international consulting company, and he was based in Delhi for quite some time. So now I would like to call upon Mr. Vishal Thapa to moderate the discussion session.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste. Welcome. यहाँलाई त सबैलाई थाहा होला नेपाल भारत विद्युत व्यापार सम्झौताको एउटा चर्को विषयबाट the subject of great controversy. Everybody has an opinion and different opinions. If you look around this room, there's probably as many different opinions as there are people. In fact, most political parties probably have two opinions. One when they are in government and one when they are outside of government. Experts have as many opinions as they have reporters. But if you step back a little bit, the Nepal-India Power Trade Agreement basically boils down to like a Bollywood film affair, a love affair. Amir Gharana ko keti, Garib Keta, Prem, the parents don't agree. The whole premise of the film is not that the love affair is in dispute. That is never the subject of the film. The two people are in love and they should get married. That's the whole point of the film. But the question is, every few minutes there's a new obstacle in the film. Something comes up and they just can't do it. And you think, now they're about to get married, and boom, there is an uncle that comes up from somewhere or an auntie who says, no, this can't happen. Our Nepal-India Power Trade Agreement is kind of like that. We know it has to happen, but it's obstacles after obstacles after obstacles. But at the end, all movies, Sapai Chalachitra has to come to an end. But our movie has been going on for 20 years. Almost 20 years ago, we signed an agreement between ministers to get a power trade agreement. And today, our delegation is now in Delhi trying to hammer out an agreement. So, will it be the end of a beautiful love story that comes to a wonderful conclusion like Bollywood? Or will it be one of the harsh realities of life where we realize some love affairs are just not meant to happen? So to address that question, I have three excellent speakers that are going to unravel and give you the answer. So let me introduce them one by one. Mr. Hitendra Sakya. Mr. Sakya brings with him tremendous experience and a long experience in working within the power sector. But he's one of the personalities that probably has a better pulse of what Indian prices and what power markets are doing than many traders in India. The second guest I'd like to invite is Dr. Sandeep Shah. Dr. Shah has been, has watched this sector in Nepal across many decades, across many policies, across many prime ministers, across many governments, and if I may say so, across many journalists as well. He's weathered it all. I think there are two things that he knows: how to generate and how to make a business out of generating from hydroelectricity. So I'm very pleased to welcome him. My third guest, Mr. T.N. Thakur. Mr. Thakur has played a very key role in transforming the Indian power sector when it was in the hands of government. I think he's single-handedly credited with starting the Indian power markets with bringing trade and with building a company that is one of the leading power trading companies in the world. I think one of the things you will notice today is that as I gave you these introductions, I did offer you, as most of these conferences do, where they are from and what is their actual designation. Because today I speak to them not really as a member of their industry or a particular company, but really, I think, just as citizens of both the countries. And what they have promised me is two things. They'll talk either from their heart or from their minds. So it's up to you to decide which they end up talking through. But those are the two things that they're going to be talking about. So in that respect and in the context of that conversation, what I would like to suggest is that I think the questions that is directed at them also be directed with taking the issues in mind rather than focusing on the specific companies that they represent. Saket, if I can start, first question with you. A very simple but I think quite a loaded question. Why is India so important to Nepal? It'll always be a big country, it'll always be a neighboring country. We've had power that flows from India to Nepal for a long time. But why is it that India is now like the center of our gravity in terms of trying to think about our future for power development? Why is India so important?
First of all, Nepal's power sector is now getting dominated or predominant the private sector, presently 40%, and it is expected that the share of the power energy of the private sector is going to go high. That's one part. And the second part, we are completely 100%, almost 100% solar energy there. Most of them is river based. So our hydrology is such that we have excess power in the wet season and deficit in the dry season. So these two factors make it very important that we have the market in India available to us. And that's why it is getting more and more relevant and very pertinent to us that we have PPA, power trade agreement, G2G level power trade agreement, so that the confidence of the investors, the private sector, will be there to invest in the power.
What do you think, Mr. Thakur? You've been coming to Nepal for many years, I think almost every year in the last decade. And besides being a well-wisher of Nepal, what does India really want from Nepal in terms of hydrosector development? What's India's interest?
Look, if you look back from the 50s on, India has been looking at Nepal's hydro sector for two reasons. One, mainly for the flood control, because the Nepalese rivers, not the Nepalese rivers, the rivers originating from Nepal are passing through India before it goes to the sea. And therefore, some parts of India get flooded, and India has been very worried about it. And I remember when I was Secretary to Chief Minister in Bihar, that was one of the main issues facing Bihar those days, and the Bihar Chief Minister wanted to meet the Prime Minister of Nepal and wanted to get to some solution to this. So that is one reason. The second is that hydropower, if you are able to control the flood affecting India, and if you are able to develop hydropower in Nepal, then what happens? That, as has been rightly said by Mr. Sakia, that your hydrology is such that the wet season you will have always surplus, and the dry season you will have deficit. So far, Nepal has been a net importer of power from India, and I don't see any reason why Nepal should be net importer. Actually, Nepal should be net exporter of power to India if the two countries work together. And therefore, India can always try to push the stable power, the base load power to Nepal, and get the hydropower and peaking power whenever India has a peaking deficit. So that is another thing. But having said so, let me tell you that it's not important that India needs power or power could go to India. It's not important. What is important is that, like many countries have many natural resources, and Nepal has water as a natural resource. you have plenty of water, plenty of rivers, and therefore, for the development of Nepal, the hydro potential is to be exploited, and only when hydro potential is exploited, I think economic development in Nepal will take place. And only when you have surplus, then you push that to India, because India offers a market. And if you tomorrow, if there is SAARC grid or SAARC market, you can push to any country in the SAARC region. So that is how it should be looked at. I must tell you one thing more, because I have been coming here for the last for 10 years. I came continuously from 2001 onwards, when we established Power Trading Corporation in India way back in year 2000. And I have a feeling, maybe I am wrong, and I wish I am wrong, but I have a feeling that there is some amount of trust deficit between India and Nepal, not at the individual level, but maybe at a different level. And therefore, I would be very keen that if this relationship gets strengthened through hydropower, I think that trust deficit will vanish, and then there will be more opportunity for the relationship between India and Nepal, and the two countries can work together. Having said this, if you permit me, I will say one thing more before you ask me further questions. As I said already, that's not important how much power you export to India. No, I had said way back in 2006 or 7, I forget, in Nepal, when I was organizing the Power Summit, that by 2020, Nepal should be able to generate 10,000 megawatt of hydropower. And most of the people, very senior people in the audience, raised their eyebrows and said, can it be possible? So by 2020, at that time I had said 10,000 megawatt. Now it may be even less, because by 2020 is very near. So by 2020, if you are able to export even 5,000 megawatts to Nepal, by 2020, India will have a grid of 300,000 megawatts. So therefore, it will be important to get this 5,000 megawatt also to benefit India. I agree, but it's not so important for India to get this 5,000 out of 300,000 megawatt of power needs. If you get 5,000 from somewhere else. And secondly, let's not forget also that we have the same hydro potential in the Himalayan states of India. So therefore, let us not look it from the point of view of who is going to benefit. Let us try to exploit hydropower, because it is a resource for Nepal, and it will do good to both India and Nepal, and it will be a good bonding activity between India and Nepal, and that is how we should view it. And yesterday evening, when I was chatting with some of the Nepalese friends, I recalled one thing, and that also I would like to speak here, because as I said, I am speaking from heart. Therefore, I am not thinking whether I should speak or not, but I am speaking. And let me tell you, I was a bureaucrat in Government of India. I was a civil servant. I worked in Government of India for 40 years. I am not a government servant now. I am not a diplomat now. Therefore, I am an ordinary citizen of India. So, as an ordinary citizen of India, I can express any feelings without any handicap. So, what happened that I was in Shanghai and in a panel discussion, and somebody asked a question that China has developed so fast, why India is not developing? And one of the European participants remarked that is because there is too much of politics in everything in India. Too much of democracy in India, Too much of democracy in India. And we had on the panel, I was one of the panelists, and we had on the panel a former Minister of India, the leading journalist of India, a well-known journalist, and a very well-known economist from UK, of Indian origin. And so, the former minister and this journalist reacted very violently and said, what do you mean by too much of democracy? You have democracy or you don't have democracy. There's nothing like too much of democracy or too little democracy. But I intervened and said that what he meant was not too much of democracy. What he meant was too much of politics in everything in India. And I think Nepal also suffered from that. And I agree that there is too much of politics in everything in India, whatever you do, and there is too much of politics in everything in Nepal, whatever you do. And we suffer from that. Let us get over that. Let us get over that. Let us find a way forward, and I think it will be good for all of us.
So I think in the first two questions itself, you have a view of what is both the opportunity and also the types of challenges. But before I go on to the next question, I just want to clarify that I don't have a monopoly of all the questions in this session. So you are more than welcome to join me in asking questions at any point during the conversation. I'll obviously help to moderate the questions. So if you wish to ask a question at any point, just raise your hand and I guess the mic will come around. But while you're thinking about your question, let me ask Dr. Shah. I think, as I said, you heard the opportunities, big market, lots of resources, but challenging, overwhelming politics. You have to make money from generating power from hydroelectricity. If the PPA is there, how would you make money? What would you do that will suddenly change, that allows you to make money as a hydro business?
I think, hydropower is a very high risk investment, very high risk business. And among all the other risks that we look at, one of the principal risks we try to analyze is the market risk. And yes, Nepal has a lot of resources on the hydro side, but there is a limited market within Nepal. And I think, given the state of affairs in Nepal right now, it's very, very difficult to do projects which have international investments, which are funded by international commercial banks and are financed principally on project finance basis. And in order for us to look at the marketability of the power that we generate from our projects here in Nepal, we are in a situation where we only have the option of selling power to one entity, which is the state utility here in Nepal, NEA. We feel that there should be other options available for us to sell the power that we are generating. If we are allowed to sell to third parties within Nepal, if the power sector reforms are in place such that we can sell our power to third parties directly without having to go through the NEA, the utility medium, I think that would open up the market to quite an extent. More than that, if we have the access to India, and as we all know, India is a tremendous market. It's a very vibrant market. It's growing very rapidly. Yes, there's a lot of generation being added to the Indian system, but I think there is still a lot of scope for the hydropower from Nepal, principally because of the proximity to the load centers in India, and also the fact that if we can build some peaking possibilities in our power projects, we would be able to participate in the Indian electricity exchange market and better utilize the potential that we have. So yes, profit is not a bad word for me, and I always believe that we are not in the business of charity. We have to make money from whatever we are doing. To have the possibility of diverse markets within the country and outside of that also, and if it can happen through this power trade agreement, we will be, I think, one of the most happy, companies, or the entire private sector, I should say, would be very happy to have that opportunity to go to an alternate market. Now, one of the other key issues that we see besides the availability of markets is the risk of the counterparty where we are going to sell power. Currently, the counterparty risk here in Nepal is quite high. And that's why we need to have the possibility of selling power to other off-takers of power. And I think India provides us with that flexibility. So both in the near term as well as in the long term, we see that this opportunity is going to tremendously benefit.
One of the criticisms that you hear is that that's strange. I mean, we are at 160 kilowatt hours per capita, one of the lowest in the world. In the next 20 years, even if we're at like 300, we double that, our demand would be large, right? And with such a small amount of per capita, and electricity being an indicator of development, whereas in India, we're at like 750 or nearly 50 kilowatts. How can there even be a notion that there isn't adequate demand? So, if you look at it as a business, I mean, surely you have a sector, an economy that's growing. You have people that are consuming 150, and you know that is waiting to buy more television, more fridges, whatever, more industry. So why isn't this country where you should be focused in generating and selling? Why do you need an alternate market?
I think, the ultimate goal would be to have at least 1,000 kilowatt hours per capita here also, or more. But we are not in that stage yet. And yes, we would love to be even at 300. But to get to that stage, we still have a long way to go. So we need to have not only the sector reforms in place, but we also need to have the infrastructure to provide or to distribute this electricity to the end consumers. Now, I think, yes, there is a latent demand in the system which would really be appreciating any additional generation which is available in the system. But at the moment, we don't see that happening, in the next 3 to 5 years. I've had a lot of debates with energy planners about what is the real requirement here in Nepal. Yes, we can definitely use a lot of power in Nepal. But because of the seasonality of power generation from a power plant, we need to definitely have an alternate market. And definitely if we have an alternate market which is willing to pay a price for, let's say, peaking power, then why can't we scale up our generation? Why can't we scale up our installation?
So that we benefit? What you're saying is that really the notion of an alternate market is a transition bridge to when the demand begins to pick up. And unless you have the transition bridge, do you agree? Is that how you see?
Yeah, basically that's true. That we need a market. But the another point that you raised was the load forecast. The load forecast that we are having right now is quite conservative. But even if we have a large, very high load forecast, like Professor Herman is telling, we have policy-driven scenarios, and we'll have in 2020 instead of 2,000 megawatt as we take now, it will be 4,000 megawatt. But what I'm saying is that fine, we have 4,000 megawatt, we'll have capacities to meet the 4,000 megawatt for 3 hours. But what about the 21 hours? We'll be having excess energy, and the rivers will not stop for 21 hours. We have to have reservoirs. So that comes down to what? The cost of energy from a reservoir versus a river. So, and then I again want to stress the first point that I raised last time, the preponderance of private sector. That really changes the issue. If it's just government, then government would have developed reservoir projects without thinking about the cost to the economy. Maybe they would, but when it's private sector, they're conscious of the cost, and you have to sell that power, and what is the readiness to pay. So it all boils down to, you must have competitive price of energy, and that comes when you have mix, and you build run of river, or maybe peaking run of river, and get the cheaper energy for the rest of the time.
So you're saying basically that we think of not necessarily two separate markets, but really as a portfolio. Whenever you have some type of capacity here.
So the optimization of not only our national optimization, but a regional optimization.
The regional system.
India also benefits from our power. Their specific energy cost also goes down.
Right.
Not only ours.
But let me, I think this point is often very heavily politicized, and I want to pick up on a point that you made about, the interference of politics, I guess, which we can't really get away with. Unfortunately, we have democracies in both the countries. And the other point which you said is the notion of distrust. And I want to pick up on the arguments that the other two gentlemen have made, which is that, look, we see, demand in Nepal is small today, but it's going to grow, and so we need India as like a transitional bridge to when a demand will come on the system, etc., or as a larger system portfolio. I think the politics of that conversation here is that nobody trusts India.
Really?
Nobody trusts India. Everybody thinks that, they're going to monopolize, and even, so what happens in that context of fear and distrust, as you said, is that even the smallest word in an agreement is like exploding, and, it doesn't. So from your perspective, as you look at it, from India's point of view, and then also as somebody who knows this area, Nepal, very well, what really is at the heart of this distrust? And is there something we can do to minimize the indulgence of politics in this issue?
One factor will come to my mind. for this level of distrust or trust deficit, whatever you call it, is because today Nepal is heavily dependent on India because of the geographical location. You have whatever you get from outside, you get through India. Right. The ships come to Calcutta, and from there you get to Nepal. Also, there may be a fear, and as I said, I wish I am wrong, there may be fear that sometimes if India tries to arm twist, which has, I don't think that has happened yet, then it may cause some damage to the Nepalese economy because you are heavily dependent on the Indian, because of the geographical location, as I said, that everything comes through India. And but once you have this cooperation in the hydropower sector, once you start working together, and that is what my wish has been for the last 12, 14, 13 years that I have been coming here, that let us begin somewhere and let us see how we behave with each other. Now, we have been thinking, we have this sense of insecurity, sense of fear. On the Indian side, sometimes people say, look, if we get power from Nepal, our grid security may be affected. Our grid security may be affected because the power from Nepal will be very unreliable, and then sometimes it can cause some problem to the grid security. I said you don't have to, you can find a technical solution around this. I mean, it's only a kind of fear which is not insoluble. You can find a solution for this and you can get out. The idea is that once you start working under a framework which both countries agree, you start working together on one project, on two projects, one PPA, two PPA, and then see how we behave with each other. Now, let me tell you that even when you get to 20,000 megawatts of generation in Nepal, as very rightly has been said by Mr. Saki and Dr. Shah, that you have to depend on some other source of power because of the dry season, when you have to get. Secondly, you have to depend for base load or somewhere. Now, India has large thermal power plants, and therefore, during that base load hours and also for the dry season, you can get power from India and then give back power to India during the wet season, so that you are neutral. And you may make more money, but at least you are neutral. The price would be different, but if you have a long-term arrangement, then that price variation can be taken care of. So what I would suggest, that for any project, and this is what I have been suggesting in India when I was in PTC or when I was outside here, that you should have long-term PPA for, let's say, 70-80% of your generation capacity. That's how I have worked out. And once you have that, then your economics gets taken care of, in the sense your return on equity, your debt servicing, all these things get taken care of. 20 to 30% you can leave for the market, and there if the market gives you higher price, you get higher price. Sometimes the price in the market will be low and you have to be content with the low price, but at least you are not worse off. So that, but in that manner you can make more money. Whereas when you have a thermal power, from thermal power project for agreement for the base load supply, that will be more or less on a fixed price. Basically, fixed price means I'm not saying that fixed for the entire duration of the PPA, but there will not be seasonal variations, or there will not be market fluctuations affecting this. And so therefore, if you can pay for the thermal power that you are buying from India, get money from India for the hydropower, and then grow and prosper. And I am sure that you will have more power to pump into India than you draw from India over the year.
But let me ask you a follow-up question on this, because I guess, you know, as I look across the Indian power sector too, there is a large amount of hydro potential, and that argument could be made for Northeast, it could be made for North India. What's so unique about Nepal's terrain and the politics and the messiness of inter-country politics and agreements, etc., that the two countries should be meddling around, just, you know, get on with their shows? I mean, India has over 160,000 megawatts of supposed potential.
This is for any country. I'm going on a larger thing, that for any country, it's always important to have good relations with neighbors. And as long as you have good relations with neighbors, you have much less problems than when you don't have good relations with neighbors. So it is in India's interest, and that's what our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has been suggesting and has taken initiatives to improve relationship with neighbors, because we realize that one has to happen. So once you work together, I think the relationship will grow stronger. We already have very good relationship between India and Nepal, but that will grow stronger. Now coming to hydro potential in India, I have myself said that there is very, all the Himalayan states in India have similar hydro potential that Nepal and Bhutan have. But wherever hydro potential is developed, from wherever, whether it comes from Arunachal Pradesh, it comes from Sikkim, or it comes from Nepal and Bhutan, it's welcome in India. After all, you get energy, and this region has energy deficit. So from wherever energy comes, it's welcome, and from wherever we can get. So it will be in the mutual benefit of both the countries. It will improve relationships, and I am 100% sure that if we start working on this, the trust deficit will also come down. Unfortunately, we have not worked together in this area, and that's why the trust deficit has been born. Also, as I said, there's too much of politics in both the countries, so that also creates some problems. But leave aside politics now, because we are professionals and we are discussing on the
very non-political subject.
So leave aside that. So therefore, let's begin somewhere. My whole purpose was, whenever I came, I would say that let's begin from somewhere, and that prompted me to sign the power purchase agreement between NEA and PTC for supply of 150 megawatt, and which can be enhanced to 300 megawatt. And mind you, that is what enabled financing of the transmission link. If that PPA was not there, the transmission link would not have been financed. The Muzaffarpur-Ghalkiabad transmission line.
So I guess the issue is just, let's just do it. Go on, yeah, please.
The question was, India has 160,000 megawatt potential, and we are right in Nepal. I think it's a question of, the low-hanging fruit, picking up the low-hanging fruit first, and optimizing. So there are 160,000 megawatts, some are low, some are high, and in Nepal also some are low, some are high. That's why no longer Upper Nanali, Winter, and Roshangi, the low-hanging fruit, are where India is invested right now. So they will be picked up first, and slowly it will go up. So I think India is not interested here for a charity purpose. They're interested here for her own interest, and they will, of course, it will replace her third power, the basic source.
So is that why you lost all your hair, like going after the low-hanging fruit? Sorry.
Just one small comment. When I joined civil services and I was a professional, we were told while talking about foreign policy that every country has its national interest in mind in regard to foreign policy. So if India says that it will buy power and give you some, give you price, or India gives aid, it is not only out of love for Nepal. It's in the national interest of India and Nepal both. So it's always we want to go to some national interest.
So if I summarize, this part of the conversation, the basic idea is there is an immense opportunity between the two countries, both because of the differences in the system, the differences in the sectors almost, the availability of low-hanging fruit. But what is the obstacle is that certain kinds of distrust, whatever they are, and so that really provides the opportunity. But I want to stop and see if there are any more questions. If there's any questions here, I guess not. But let me then move, I guess, to the next part of the conversation, which is that okay, we understand that there is a need. But all that said, power is still flowing across from India and Nepal. Some of the plants that you mentioned are still being built, right? And they're intending to export to India. So why are we so hung up on the importance of the PTA? What does PTA do for us that it didn't do before? You start.
I think this is the fear of, my partners from power decision now. It's so common, from power decision, it makes sense. Nothing is stopping volume company. And also, can they export import power from India, from Bihar, or from Manipur? There's no regulation that is stopping you from import that thing. And we believe that it is possible. But I think the theory that in the middle of the day, the rules may change. That's the key. And I think if you go back to history, a little bit historical insight, I don't know, let me speak it out. We have good trade agreement and free flow to from India from third country to Nepal. Probably in 1989, the third agreement expired and the government relation at that particular time was not good. We had a problem. And you know, that was such an environmental mistrust that we still had, that which was still there till our Prime Minister came and spoke in the Parliament, and we had a lot of that not very different.
Yeah, so we don't really need a PTA, we just need the Prime Minister to come here and give us this.
The communication, the process of that, the rules will not change.
The institutionalization of that.
The import license, import value, this has been removed for the time being, and then come back to the economy. So you can have a negative, and it is binding for both the governments.
But let me ask Mr. Thakur, we had a very large public limited company, which obviously is very accountable to many shareholders, and he signed a 150 megawatt deal with Nepal, power is flowing, and he didn't ask for a PTA. What gave you the security that you could do that deal without jeopardizing or risking your potential investors in the company?
Well, we secure when it comes to financing of the company or the project, you have to have what is called the payment security and also the security for implementing the contract that you are signing. So you have to have both. So if there is a default of the contractor, then there are ways of getting around it. Similarly, if there is the payment problem, then there are ways of getting around it. And we incorporated all that into the PPE. So there was no issue on that. There was no issue on that. And we also thought, as I said already, we also thought that by supplying this 150 megawatt, we will be able to give that power to Nepal, and in turn, we will get power from Nepal during the wet season. Now, there was a very strong argument coming from NEA, and maybe you are aware of that what happens, because our agreement was for supply of 150 megawatt around the year, 12 months a year, and around the clock, right? So what happens when Nepal doesn't give that power? Then maybe KTC will still be insisting that we take this power and pay to us. So I volunteered and I said that we will buy back this power whenever you are in surplus. And that was also incorporated in the agreement. We have never done it in India. Mind you, for no Indian project, for no Indian PPA, we have done this kind of a arrangement where we are obliged to buy back power when you don't need it. In case of Nepal, we met their acceptance because we appreciated that during wet season you cannot need this power, and you may be suffering from that fear, which we have already talked about, the sense of mistrust or distrust, whatever you call it, that what happens in wet season if India refuses to buy power, then you will surplus and British will ask for that money. So therefore we still will buy back, and that was incorporated in the agreement. The point short point I'm making is that I agree with it that we need a kind of umbrella agreement for demonstrating the larger commitment of the government on the two sides. That the governments are committed, therefore through government the people are committed that there will be power trade between India and Nepal without any hurdles. So for that you need this kind of umbrella agreement between India and Nepal. But as Mr. Thakur already has said, that even today the trade is taking place without this agreement. But you don't have that sense of security without this agreement that this will continue to be true. And that is why this agreement is required.
Yeah, so okay, the agreement gives us a sense of additional security that private investments will be protected. So let me ask you, if you were considering a big investment in cross-border trade, whether it's a transmission line, acquisition of a plant, whatever, what would you want in that agreement that is not already covered in agreements in the two countries? So what do you require to take to your investment committee and say, look, as far as we are concerned, from a reasonable point of view, the risks of trade between the two countries are protected?
I think we require a couple of things, basic principle issues to be incorporated in the trade agreement, which would provide us the sufficient level of comfort for doing this. First is open and non-discriminatory access to each other's markets. Right? So I'm speaking on behalf of both of these possibilities here. For us, it's very important here from the beginning in Nepal, we need to have.
Pause there, because I think those are very important points. Can you just, for the benefit of those listening, explain that a bit more? Open and non-discriminatory access.
Right. I think it's simply, if I can put it, basically we should be allowed to participate in the Indian electricity market, not only the exchange but also the long-term markets, as any other Indian hydropower developer. That's the basic premise that we would like to have in this whole concept. So that we can participate in the exchanges, we can participate in the various price bidding mechanisms that the Regulatory Commission in India has been incorporating. We just want to have a level playing field with the Indian hydropower developers. So that yes, we will definitely have to be competitive, and we are willing to do that. We will be competitive, and we will be we would like to access the market on equal terms, equal footing. The other thing that is very important is to have a framework agreement which provides a stable regulatory framework, so that there are no surprises at later date. Even now, when I use the word non-discriminatory, there is a possibility of reintroducing this import duty or import license in the absence of umbrella power trade agreement. We were, basically advocating to get that removed because that was a trade barrier. 2 rupees per kilowatt hour for supplying to market, which is during space 3.5 to 4 rupees was a non-issue. That now because it would have flown in that case. So stable regulatory framework for the long-term investments that we are making in Nepal.
So,
two issues.
Our team is there, as
Yes.
Discussing PTA, and they're going to come back with an agreement that will give you all of these things. So when are you planning to invest $2 billion across the country?
I think that's money. Yeah, definitely. We are looking forward to that. We are looking at some large projects right now. And one of the key concerns we had was the lack of a power trade agreement. The others being the power cross-border transmission line and the framework within Nepal itself of this project development agreement that we have been talking about. But I think things seem to be moving forward. And yes, with the recent visit of Prime Minister Modi, everything seems to have gained momentum, and we seem to be heading towards successful conclusions of this issue.
So, Mr. Thakur, just picking up on the points that he said, open, non-discriminatory access, stable government policy, sense of security. But, in some sense, India is as complicated as we are, if not more. They are a federal structure. I think we are trying to get there. But the rules in India, the PTA will be signed at the center. And the power sector is actually a dual subject between the center and the state. So, but transactions have to happen in the state. So how does that work? Is it really binding on the state?
As far as non-discriminatory open access to the grid is concerned, that's the law in India. That's the law in India. Under the Electricity Act 2003, any power supplier or any off-taker of power will have non-discriminatory open access for the grid, except subject to grid constraint. If there is no grid capacity, then nothing can be done about it. So it's subject to grid constraint, which is the law in India. So once you are going to India to participate in the power supply or power purchase, then you automatically get that. Nobody can discriminate in it. The question is that you should be allowed. Now, you are already allowed. The next question comes that if by through some kind of mechanism, government can make it difficult for you to come to India, as has been cited, the 2 rupees of import duty. makes some of the power plants unviable for selling power in India. Right. So that has been wrong. That has been wrong. So that is why I think this PPA is needed. That's to give you a larger comfort that government of India or maybe government of Nepal also will be bound by this. So either government of India or government of Nepal would provide assistance, will provide to smoothen things than to make things difficult for power trade between India and Nepal. But subject to that, I don't think PPA will have any more details or any more language or whatever you call it. So PPA will be only defining that there will be no obstacles from either government or the trade of power. And then the individual project will have to find its own path, will have to find its own supplier of power if you are buying power from India. And then, as I said already, that whether it is generation power, or generation project, or is it transmission thing, everything depends on the market financing. And market financing will happen only when you have PPA or transmission agreement and we say that. Those are matters of detail. But the larger intent should be covered by this PPA.
But you know, the Electricity Act in India, I think it was done in 2003.
Right.
That was a big act. But even as we look now, that implementation is not uniform across the states. Some states are doing better than others. Maharashtra is doing very well. Bihar is doing not so well. Unfortunately, we have to trade with Bihar. And so, let me ask you, and then I want also Mr. Sakia to respond. The intent is, of course, it takes a lot of time to implement across the states. And the variations across the states is often the bottleneck. Is that something that we just have to work through, or is that something that can be codified in an agreement?
Indian power sector is now regulated. Right? So you have regulators at the national level and you have regulators at the state level. And under the law, a lot of powers have been vested with the regulators. Now, not all the regulators are proactive and forthcoming. Sometimes I agree the regulators may get biased because of the local pressure or local conditions or local state distribution or company's requirements, and therefore the things are not uniform in all the states in India, which will always happen in the federal sector. Anywhere in the federal sector that is bound to happen. But as far as import or export of power is concerned, I don't think there will be any problem. But then, if you are going to sign PPA with a state distribution company, you have to have agreement with that state distribution company, and there the regulator in that state may come and fix. And it has happened with our trading corporation, PTC's PPA with the state distribution company. We had always to go to the state regulator, and we are not always happy with the awards of the state regulator. So I mean, that's a market risk which you face and which you have to encounter. And nobody can give any assurance what the regulator will say or not say. Now let me tell you what are the problems which can be anticipated in going to a particular state. One is the state wheeling charges, which is determined by the state regulator. That if you are using the state grid, what will be the charge that you have to pay per unit of electricity. Now, if you want to bypass that, then you go to the central grid. If you go to the central grid, run by the central utility or any other central transmission provider, now private sector can also provide transmission across the state under the law in India. So therefore, then once you bypass the state grid, then you don't have to worry about the wheeling charges of the state. If you are going to supply power to a particular consumer in a state, now industrial consumers, commercial complexes are free to buy power from anywhere under the law. Then they may levy some surcharge, regulators may levy some surcharge, and that may become difficult for anybody to access any consumer in their state. That is also now being relaxed in the sense that the Act says that over a period of time, it should be no more than 20% of the cost of supply. So therefore, now that we are coming to that timing now, where it cannot be more than 20% of the cost of supply, and therefore that would not be a major issue. Similarly, on the state wheeling charges, I don't think it would be a major issue because now regulators are becoming fairly, I would say, reasonable and rational. And one thing more that has been done under the amendment to the Act is that they have created a body called Forum of Regulators, which meets every quarter. And all the state regulators under the chairmanship of the Central Regulators Regulatory Commission chairman meet, and most of these issues get decided here now. And then that becomes a kind of norm I think whatever problems we are seeing from the state to state and from place to place in India, those will be becoming less and less as we as we go along. And I think that would not be a major hurdle in future.
Yeah. Mr. Sakya, right? Big question here. I mean, for you, in terms of trading with India, is there a difference in how you're successfully able to deal with certain states, and will the PTA actually change something fundamentally from a day-to-day operation point of view?
Well, I don't know about the PTA, what will be there in the PTA,
Right.
but
You can only guess.
tomorrow. But yeah, there is a difference. We are talking about, let's say, Maharashtra, Haryana, or the other states. They are at the developed. The regulation is a very developed state. Although Electricity Act 2003, of course, as you said, it has been, a different pace. They have adopted that. And unfortunately, our neighboring states, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, they have been the laggards in the matter of deregulation. But they are going anyway. And recently, they have learned that Bihar has the DSEB has unbundled, and transmission units are going to be separate, and therefore we'll have very quick between wheeling charges should be known to us, and we can decide whether we want to buy from Jharkhand or we want to buy from some other states to Bihar and bring it to the West Bengal or the Nagpur. So I think we have to wait for these two states to come along, and no matter the PTA, whatever the PTA is, I think we are more reliant on what is the state of development of the regulation in India, and then comes the PTA. Of course, when we want to deal and have a long-term contract. One thing I want to touch here before what Mr. P.S. Thakur said. This PSA, Power Service Agreement that we have with BTC for 150 megawatt for 25 years, RTC, of course that was a building block for the transmission line between the Thakur and Gulfport. And that precursor to this PTA. So it already clears a lot of grounds. If we were talking about PTA now and the transmission line was not there and it's going to be in the future, there were so many fuzzy things. We would be wondering how to do it, what. But we already have a lot of things answered by that Power Service Agreement and that cross-border transmission line. A lot of things are clear. The PTA will only make it certain that this is the way things are going to go in the future for all of the cross-border transmission lines.
So it's a possibility that we open a Nepal Power Trading Company in India? Is a possibility? Or you just deal with some counterparts there?
Yeah, and just like PTC India, we are dealing with PTC India here. Yeah. So the similar role can be utilized for PTC Nepal in the Indian market, or quick procure.
Yeah. I think all of this, obviously sounds interesting, but I want to also bring to your attention, which you all know, and maybe the audience attention also, is that maybe there are some darker shades to this picture. And the darker shade is that the Indian power sector is under a lot of distress, right? I mean, in the sense that, I think last year there was news that maybe 1,70,000 crores of potentially funding was stranded. The sector is going through a major change. There's a lot of fuel shortages. If I were Nepal and I'm thinking, well, we have enough problems on our own, and now we're going to go and sign a PTA and reach on to another place that has even bigger problems than us. How do you put that current seeming distress of the Indian power sector into context?
What went wrong with the Indian power sector? I would categorize in two categories. One is that the reforms which were anticipated under the Act did not take place, of which Mr. Sakya also has said that in some states the reforms have not taken place. Another thing that happened was I would say, very unrealistic estimate of the coal availability from Coal India. Coal India is the holding company for all the coal companies in India, and coal supply agreements for the thermal power projects were to be signed by Coal India, where the government of India gave letters of allocation, and the projects got financed on the basis of letters of allocation from the Ministry of Coal. And later on, the Coal India said that they were not in a position to produce so much of coal and supply. That was one bit of scheme. Another was that people knew that Coal India would not be able to supply the entire coal needs of the power project, and therefore import of coal was freely allowed. And anybody who wants to import coal and use imported coal, and that is how people like Adani, Tata, they went to Indonesia, tied up coal. But again, there was a change in the regulation in Indonesia. And because of the change in regulation in Indonesia, which was foreign to the Indian contract, and the Indian contract had not factored into that change of regulation outside India into the contract, as a result of which the project became unviable. At that level of coal pricing from Indonesia, the project became unviable. Now the question was how to get out of that contract. So you have to now do something to amend the contract, and people in the government were not prepared to amend the contract for fear of criticism, because they were all private parties. So if it was with the government parties, I think it would have been much easier. But they had again the sense of insecurity that if you do it for a private party, then you will maybe accused of favoring someone or disfavoring someone. So all these things went on. Then finally, now the matter is before the Regulatory Commission. Also, for the coal blocks allotment, there were some irregularities, and the Supreme Court of India came very heavily and said that these coal blocks were illegally allotted. That's the price you pay for democracy and for transparency. So this is what has happened. But the current government, the present government, is very conscious of this problem, and they have said that wherever coal blocks are cancelled for the power project, the coal linkages will be given. Coal linkages will be given through democracy and for transparency. So this is what has happened. But the current government, the present government, is very conscious of this problem, and they have said that wherever coal blocks are cancelled for the power project, the coal linkages will be given. Coal linkages will be given through the Coal India, and Coal India will be allowed to import coal from outside, and then Coal India will, to meet its obligation of supply of coal to the power project, will import coal. Right. So all these steps are being taken. I believe that this is transition stage, and I don't think that it will cause much of a problem on a long-term basis. But as far as the relationship between India and Nepal is concerned, and as far as the PPA or PSA that you signed between Nepal and India, I don't think that will be affected by these kinds of factors. Because you will have PSA or PPA with particular projects, with particular states, particular set of consumers when you go to sell power or buy power from particular project. So therefore, I don't think that will be affecting it. For example, the 150 megawatt which India has signed with CPC, I don't think that will have that will ever get affected. Because CPC is obliged to supply that power, and CPC has to supply that power. So this contract will be on.
What do you think, Dr. Shah? Lots of foreign companies particularly have tried their hand at the Indian market with somewhat limited success. Is this something that Nepal as a country or the power trading company will be able to maneuver, or mostly from your perspective as a commercial enterprise, in terms of managing that complexity of not just one but two marketplaces?
Yeah, I think it's a very complex market, definitely. The Indian market sometimes we compare it to the US.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to have some very fancy footwork to go through that system. I think yes, a lot of international companies have tried to enter the Indian market and have exited. But I think there are some international companies who have the required expertise to participate in such trading mechanisms, are persisting, and I think they have already met with some success, and I think they have long-term plans to stay in the market and try to see what best they can achieve in that market. And I think that's a definite possibility for us from here in Nepal as well. We definitely need to have the technical expertise to participate in that market, and strategy has also said that we need to make sure that we are able to pool together all the power which is available in the integrated Nepal power system, so that there is one entity which will have the volume to negotiate good prices across the border, and also participate in the market wherever the market is willing to participate in Nepal. The larger projects will definitely get into will have the strength as well as the intent to do long-term contracts or mixed contracts of long-term and merchant market systems. But looking at the current context of Nepal for enhanced generation plants as well as for the domestic players which are getting into the generation business, the ideal situation would be to have this power trading company here in Nepal, which would pull together the power and have the required technical and commercial expertise to trade with India. That's a definite opportunity for us.
I have a question there now, just because it's new, we do not know how it's going to happen. But as far as I know, hydropower projects in India, when they want to have a long-term contract to DISCOMs, their tariff is subject to CERC. And CERC is going to determine based on their cost proposals and all that, and they determine what is going to be the tariff. Well, what happens with Nepal? We, as a Nepal Electricity Authority, cumulatively have all those 150 PPAs, and then we want to sell long term for 6 months. First thing, there is no such production. 6 months for 6 months energy, RTC maybe around the clock, but only for 6 months or 5 months or 7 months, let's say. But of a year for 25 years, that kind of product is not available right in India. What's going to happen? I don't know. But even if we go there, who is going to determine that tariff? If CS is going to determine the tariff, no, even if you get the best tariff, there's going to be a lot of noise about the sovereignty and CRC is determining our tariff and things like that. And here in Nepal, we don't have a regulatory authority yet, let alone the competence of that authority. So that is a gray area of how is. Because all of our power is hydro. Yeah. If it is thermal, then we can sell it directly to the trader and through the market price. What about hydro? It is said that the CS is going to determine the trade power. I don't know what's going to happen.
So,
and that's it.
If I understand you correctly, and I think what you all said is that the PTA doesn't necessarily take away the market risk. You are still trading in a market, and as a trader in that market, you pay the prices of going up, down, demand, supply, and the fundamentals. What the PTA does is it guarantees you the rules of the game. The rules of the game won't change. Whether you survive in that game and make a lot of money, or whether you make a bad bet and lose all your money, is your business, right? We're still exposed to that sort of risk.
It's not that hydropower tariff has to be approved by the Central. That's not the requirement. The requirement is little different. Of course, that is in practice that has been done in some cases. The requirement is little different. If you can sign an agreement with any DISCOM, the division company, or for that matter any private company, the CRC will not permit it. Right? So if you can negotiate the tariffs, agree between the two parties, and then decide on that. But if you are going to a DISCOM for selling power, then the state regulator clearance is required not for looking into the tariffs of your country, but to look into two things. One is that whether the state needs this additional power. Okay? And secondly, whether the tariff which has been agreed is within the range of tariff which other projects are offering. Right. So only from these two angles, the state regulator has to clear it. from the need angle and from the reasonability of the tariff. But the state regulator doesn't go into the books of the accounts to determine the tariff. Central regulator, why is the central regulator is being approached for larger projects? The reason for that is that earlier the Central Electricity Authority used to approve the project cost, which will not be the case for projects in Nepal, because authorities in India have no, I think, local society to approve project cost just there. But when you go to sell power in that country, then what will be seen by the state regulator if you are going to this problem? That whether it is in the reasonable range and whether there is a need. But if you are going to sell power to a third party, which is not a distribution company, then you can sell and nobody is going to question it. No regulator can also question. That's a negotiation between the two parties. Right? But then when you are going to sell to the third party, like the commercial complexes or industrial units, then buyer will always look at the competitiveness of power, whether he is getting competitive power. So that is a new matter of negotiation.
And I think, one of the limitations of Indian power markets, trading markets, has been the absence of financial markets, right? The parallel financial markets. So, assuming that comes up, you have swaps, you have options, some kind of hedging instruments. Assuming all of that is there, now you have exchanges where you can do that very easily. Do you envision, and we haven't seen the draft of what is going to come up, but do you envision that a PTA allows us to access those kind of financial instruments as well?
I think, I don't think that can be, that's a totally personal opinion, and I would not say it's a very considered opinion because this question has been put now, and I'm just thinking aloud, that I don't think that any PTA can take care of this disease, right? That is one. Second thing is, that when I was setting up power trading corporations in India and going around and meeting people, around that time only the California crisis had taken place in US. And everybody, and Enron also had collapsed. So everybody was telling me that when Enron has collapsed, do you think this small company will be able to stand on its feet in the power market? Because the experience of power market in US at that time, especially with the Californian countries, was bad, and Enron was bad. You always learn from those experiences. So I used to say that we learn from those experiences and will not repeat the mistake. And so what has happened in India is that the regulators are not at all keen to allow financial derivatives into the power market. So they are saying pure fiscal transactions. Pure fiscal transactions, supply and purchase of the commodity, which is electricity, without any derivatives. And repeatedly this has been discussed in India. Once the power exchange tried to have some financial derivatives, and the central regulators have put it down and said nothing. We will not allow any financial derivatives on this country.
So you don't anticipate that within the next 10-15 years there will be too many financial instruments?
In 15 years is too long a period to anticipate, but I can tell you that in the near future, I'm 100% sure financial derivatives will not be allowed on the product.
Sure.
As from Nepal electricity point of view, we will be having, we already have one under construction, Dalgewar Muzaffarpur, and another is Tanakpur. So during a certain discussion with friends in Indian Exchange, I had an impression, whether I'm right or wrong, that if we commit certain power from this Dalgewar Muzaffarpur, and for any reason we cannot supply certain power from that point, and I want to sell from Tanakpur, then that kind of change of change of source, change of supply, or say I cannot supply at all from my point, then I want to buy it from Jharkhand and sell it and fulfill my obligation. That is not allowed. Is it? Is it so? If it's
it is not allowed. I agree with that. It is not allowed. But very recently, only last week, the Central Regulatory Commission has come up with a regulation where the intent is to allow this. That's only last week the regulation. I have not myself seen the response to the regulation. but some colleagues of the former colleagues of mine came and told me that it will be allowed now. That's the intent of the central regulator. That to meet your commitment, you can change the source.
Yeah, because we recently had a disaster in one of our rivers, and about 67 megawatts is out of operation because of one landslide. So we are so predominantly hydro-based, and it could happen that we cannot fulfill our obligation, and therefore we have to look for the supply from somewhere else in India. And then instead of paying a very heavy penalty, we pay the difference only. So if that kind of option is available, then it would be good for the Nepalese hydro.
As I said, intent is to allow it. And that's the regulation that has been issued only last week. The draft regulation where it says that this kind of thing will be allowed.
I just want to pause here and check. Yeah, I think if there are some questions, I see some hands up. This is great, and I have to ask another question.
I think still we are trying to talk the problem between two countries. Actually, if you see, the biggest problem is not the market, not the anything else. The biggest is it's a love and hate relation between the political parties in this country and that country. Sometimes they love each other so much, like when the Modi visit, everybody clapping there. Sometimes we say India Murdabad. So that is the basic cause. Thanks to Prime Minister Modi, after his visit, I think almost many all these dark clouds are clear now, and this is the right time to talk something like this. What I see, I talk to many Indian counterparts, and always they are saying sometimes that Nepal can give few thousand megawatts. Okay, how is few thousand megawatts? What's about the water? Before 1950 also is a water problem. After 1950 also is a water problem. Today also is a water problem. So hydropower is linked with the water, and naturally energy security from Iran to oil, or energy security to hydropower from Nepal. Nepal is much more secure for India. And first, the biggest problem I see between these two countries, when Nepal is talking, they are thinking what India is getting benefit. When India is thinking, even I talk to many bureaucrats in India in planning commission and in the ministries, they are thinking more on Nepal benefit side. So this is the biggest basic problem between these two countries, that first they should think what I get, how much is getting. First I should see what Nepal getting benefit, and India should see what India getting benefit. So that thing is starting now. I can give you one example, like let's go to Pancheshwar. If Pancheshwar comes, India gets 15,000 hectares, let's say irrigation, whereas Nepal gets only 1,000. But Nepal gets almost 50% water right, where our basin is only 20%. 80% water is in India. So these are the mutual benefit, and we have to develop. We have to come together. We have to get married. We have to like each other. I just compare Bhutan, India, and Nepal, India relation. We are in boyfriend-girlfriend relation. Sometimes we like, sometimes we don't like. India and Bhutan is very much married. They have to depend on each other. If the power is coming from Bhutan after 10,000 megawatt, some big problem is coming in India. Because suddenly giving 10,000 megawatt from other sources will be difficult. And for Bhutan also they can stop, because they get all this trade balance, currency, export benefit, everything is there. So what I see, I think rather than whether we need power from you or not, whether we need water from you or not, talking like that, we have to say we have to do it, and both are getting the maximum benefit. Second, one comment is sometimes people discuss export. Shall we export or not? A river, when you optimize, Upper Tamakosi is 6.5 megawatt. Sandeep Sir knows better than me. Drivers is giving only 90 megawatt. So export we have to do at each and every project, whether 5 megawatt or 600 megawatt or 10,000 megawatt. We have to do export during wet season, and we have to buy during dry season. So there is no option of talking, shall we export or not? We have to. When you are 700 megawatt, thinking is different. When you are 5,000 megawatt, you have to export. Right now, we are, Hiranji knows, we are reaching 2,000 megawatt only in 2017, July. And we have to export at least 600, 800 megawatt during night time. Otherwise, that would be wasted, almost 8 billion rupees, which we can't afford. And what I say, we can't increase Q every time. Right now, it's Q40, which is never in the international standard, which is, PTA makes our power cheaper. I can say, if there is PTA, if there is open market access, we all design in Q20, Q25. That makes our power cheaper by 18% in my project. Actually, it may be 20% in some areas. Look at the Upper Gadali. 900 megawatt to export, 300 megawatt for the Nepalese market. So is it good to make 300 megawatt or to make 900 megawatt? So there is benefit for both sides, enormous benefit. But the problem is we have tried to talk that. Now I believe the new government in India, naturally there is problem in our bureaucratic system also. Two bureaucracy, Thakur sir, I tell you, they hate each other. I know the Indian bureaucracy, I know the Nepal bureaucracy. They hate each other. They want to be boss to others. Not possible. Once you are talking something for the mutual benefit, you have to leave something and you have to gain something. No? But what I suggest to, let's say, our Prime Minister office, that there should be a Nepal desk in India, in Prime Minister office, and there should be India desk in Nepal, so that any problem, these two leaders love each other so much now, for the next 5 years at least, let them solve the problem. So I see big future. We can't live without each other. We are neighbors, and we can't live without water. We can't live without hydropower sharing. We can't live without food security through irrigation. We can't live without developing all these big projects. So I think there is no other way of talking that there are alternates for Nepal and there are alternates for India. We have to live together, and that's through hydropower. Thank you.
Let me
from Republica. I want to ask a couple of questions to Mr. Thakur. Earlier you said that there should be an umbrella agreement including PTA. Could you elaborate what it includes while a team is in Delhi and discussing about PTA? And the next is, it's loud and clear here that oppositions and some experts, not some, let's say many experts are talking about that Nepal should get downstream benefit when any hydropower regulates the water. What is your opinion? Can India pay for the water that is regulated as it gets downstream benefits?
I did not say what should be in the umbrella agreement, but my take is that umbrella agreement should provide you the right environment for doing the trading of electricity between India and Nepal. So that provides the environment. For example, things like non-discriminatory open access, which Dr. Shah spoke about. That may be incorporated in the umbrella agreement, that there will be no discrimination with the projects in Nepal as far as the Indian grid or the Indian market is concerned. Similarly, there will be no adverse regulation or no adverse imposition of any kind after the agreement has been signed for any sale or purchase of power between India and Nepal. For example, as it has been said, that sometimes the duty is imposed. No, that should not happen. So these are the things which can be taken care of by the umbrella agreement. And if you take care of that under the umbrella agreement, then the intent is very clear on both sides that we have to facilitate this. So that is the purpose of the umbrella agreement. And then you go to the individual agreement, as I said, market is open, so you have open access to the market, and then you deal with the market. And then you have to, as Vishal also concluded, that when you go to the market, then you have to follow the rules of the game in the market. And that everybody has to follow. Again, there should be no discrimination. There should be no discrimination in the market, even in the following of the rules of the game of the market. So that is what I meant by having the kind of umbrella agreement which can facilitate this and can provide the confidence to the people in the market.
What about the second part of this question, which was
The use of water.
the use of water and the ability to pay for it or charge for it?
Then, the use of water, firstly, let me tell you that has been a very consensus issue for a long time, and that is why when we started this power trade, those 7 cross-sections, and also the effort to make power trade a reality between India and Nepal, we have said that leave aside water for some time. That let's not worry too much about water, because the moment you start worrying about water, then matters get complicated. But let me tell you that even sharing of the benefits from water other than electricity, I think it's also not insoluble. You can always try to find a solution. And what happened in the past was maybe some misunderstandings about duty or about conduct. Those agreements have been signed. I am not very familiar with those agreements, what kind of agreements have been signed and what happened, I am not very familiar. We always, as I said, in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, we always feel that the people are unnecessarily being inconvenienced during the rainy season because of the floods, because water comes from Nepal and it has not been controlled yet, and therefore there is that kind of anxiety, if not anger, against that things that we are facing today. But going forward, I think it can be solved, and the two sides can sit together and try to find a very amicable solution to this. But coming from what Mr. Gyanendra Pradhan said about Modi's visit, the new Prime Minister's visit, today Modi is a very well-meaning person, our new Prime Minister, and he speaks from heart, and he has a very soft corner for. I mean, he is a good human being, he is a soft corner for everything. But what I was impressed, and I don't know whether you will appreciate it, is that he distributed Gita, Bhagavad Gita. And I also distribute Bhagavad Gita. And not to my friends in India. I have just given Bhagavad Gita to my American friends from California, from Los Angeles, British friends from London and other places, the Norwegian friends, Finnish friends. I've given Bhagavad Gita to them, and they all have promised to me that they will go through. I always say that Bhagavad Gita should not be read as a religious book of Hindus, because it is a kind of guide to life. It's a manual to life, and that is how it should be taken. Now, when you are discussing about any agreement on a larger basis, I think, not the contract that you sign between project and the buyer and the purchaser. I'm not talking of that. When the two sides sit together, let's for a moment leave aside, and that's the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Let's for a moment leave aside who is going to benefit how much. So what is important is that we have to do it. People will benefit. Somebody may benefit little less, somebody may benefit little more. But benefit will go to everybody. And that's what God says. That's what Lord says. That benefit will go to everybody. Do it. And just begin from somewhere. Just do it. And the benefit will go. And I read a book called Go Giver. I'm forgetting the name of the author. I read a book called Go Giver, not Go Getter. Earlier the concept was Go Getter. Now this book says that the concept has said you should be Go Giver. And that book says that any giver, and that's what Lord Krishna also says, any giver will get more than what he gives. Any giver will get more than what he gives. That's what Lord Krishna says, and that's what that book says by an American law. It's a very small book, you can find on the internet. Because when I mentioned to somebody, he immediately ordered for that book, and he told me that he got it from the internet and he is reading it. So let's keep that aside for the time being. When we are discussing at the macro level between the countries, after all, if more benefit goes to India, the Indian friends get more benefit. If more benefit goes to Nepal, the Nepalese friends get more benefit. What's wrong in that? We cannot always weigh everything that what is 1 gram more or 1 gram less. You cannot do that. When you are dealing with human beings and dealing with relationships.
The question is related with the hydropower policy. Yeah. But what we are talking here is trade of power. So which I think in this eminent presence of eminent personalities like
and Dr. Kishore Goyal, I shouldn't be speaking anything about hydropower policy, but what I wanted to say is that we not discussing hydropower policy about the water and power nexus and the benefits of water. What about water benefits? We're not discussing. We are discussing about power trade and thus plain banyan policy trade of energy. And if there are some side benefits of water, then the hydropower policy should take care of that. How to quantify, or how to price that benefit, and who gets what. But as far as energy is concerned, how are we going to price that energy? That should be a concern, and that's where I am concerned. What price India is going to pay for my power? The 6 months, will it term it as spin energy, or will it term it as farm energy? What price I will get for long term, short term? That is, I think, should be the main question.
What Mr. Pradhan said is that the two becomes interrelated when you start talking about it, and that is the problems that cause. But then, as I said, that we have to leave us at that. What's your view?
I think very concisely I would like to say that it should be a fair and equitable solution to this whole agreement that we are discussing. I mean, as you talked about there could be more benefit to one party than the other. Not very much, but it has to be a fair and equitable.
But I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Okay, and it's not in the questions that I had initially prepared. But I think Mr. Pradhan also said, I think we all agree with him that basically we shouldn't think too much about the pros, benefits, who's going to get what, it's about trade, everybody will benefit, so let's do it. But if you think about it from the delivery in the past, everybody has not benefited. I mean, I guess this is why politicians, at least their constituency, there are large sections of our population that still don't have power. People have not always benefited. And I want to give you the case of the big World Trade Organization when India decided not to sign the agricultural treaty, recently, when it said, everybody said that this was a fair deal. And India said, I need to have food security, and didn't sign it, and the whole thing collapsed. So, what safeguards can a PTA put in place to ensure that it is really equitable, that it is really fair, and to remove doubts and apprehension?
Yeah, I think, as I said right at the beginning, if the basic premise of this power trade agreement is that there is open, non-discriminatory access to the Indian electricity market or the Nepali market matter, I think that should be the basis for any solution that we are seeing. The market forces at the end of the day will make sure that if you are going to have a fair and equitable solution, you will participate in that market. Otherwise, you will exit. And then the other basic premise was that there should be a stable regulatory framework during the period that you are going through the business. There should be no surprises. Right? If that is there, then I think we should be able to achieve this fair and equitable solution.
Would you like to add anything?
I agree with Dr. Shah. As I said earlier, that the provide the sale or purchase from Nepal will get the same treatment as the sale and purchase within India. So that's the fair treatment. Whether it is whether you buy power from Nepal or sell power from Nepal or buy power from India or sell power from India, we will be treated as par. Parties from India and Nepal will be treated as par. And as long as the PPA ensures that, I think it is fair and equitable. And then you have to go to the market and take the market risk.
This power trade agreement is a negotiation document between a large country and a small country. First thing, and in any such negotiation, what the small country or small markets looking for is free tariff access to the market. That is no direct or that kind of access. And what the large country would be looking for in the same agreement, we are giving you market, so what about me? So I should get non-tariff concessions from Nepal. So what would be non-tariff concessions? Like the investors from India coming to Nepal, investing in Upper Karnali or Arun, they will say, okay, security for my project in government guarantee that nobody disturbs this project, army security, whatever, all these things. That kind of non-direct security, I think. And probably, I think that would be addressed in a PDA, because in a PTA, that's maybe probably the reason why PTA, the earlier version of PTA was having that, and the generation part linked up, which is now, we assume, we don't know, which is now dealing with. So that part should be addressed in the PDA, and PTA will be completely preparing a level ground for both. And I think it's good that we have a PTA which will be concluded first before the PDA, which will be concluded later. So in that aspect, we are now a little bit more clever than before.
I think there are some other questions.
Both the governments are in conclusion to sign a PTA now there in Delhi, And Prime Minister's office from the Delhi is in a close monitoring all the demand, everything so closely. So I do not know if it's a pre-plan, it's a coincidence, or the impact of this discussion. The 4th of the September, the time when we are discussing about the PTA agreement and is the impact, and both the government representatives are going to sign this agreement there in New Delhi. So really, the Energy Development Council is a remarkable job, and let's hope that this evening all the media will cover the two news as a headline. And the Energy Development Council has organized one grand discussion program on the power sharing agreement with Nepal India. And second would be that both the government have signed this agreement there in India today. So I think at least this information will many other people also receive from the friends and colleagues, but it is quite relevant to share this information with you all. Thank you. Mr. Thakur, do you think that in the near future that kind of bidding will be open? And how do you live with this power trade agreement that is going to be signed? Will there be an opening for a regional power market to include that kind of opportunities whereby the power from Nepal could be evacuated to Bangladesh through the territory of India?
My view on into the subject of electricity, deviating from my civil service responsibilities, has been that it's premature to think about the SARC grid or the SARC market unless we have successfully implemented the bilateral trade between the various countries. Now, the development is a good development now that the Nepal-India power trade was going on, and now with the timing of PTA it will get further impacted. Nepal-Bhutan power trade is going on, and mind you, Bhutan is not only supplying. From this year, this financial year, in the dry season, Bhutan will also buy power from India. In the dry season, their load is also increasing. So it will be a two-way flow from January of 2015. And that was agreed when I was in PTA system. So that also going to happen. And there is now also a trade between electricity between India and Bangladesh. So what has happened is now bilateral trade is going on between Nepal, India, Bangladesh, India, and Bhutan, India. Once these are successfully concluded and successfully implemented for some time, then that confidence will develop, and then there will be what you were talking about, a trade of that kind, where Nepal can supply to Bangladesh, or Bhutan can supply to Bangladesh, and vice versa through the Indian trade. So that can happen, and I am sure that will happen one day. But the beginning is these kinds of bilateral trade, and that will generate confidence, that will remove the trust deficit, and then that will happen.
Bangladesh, Nepal, and India for developing such a market. But from that point to now, if you compare the developments, the bilateral trade agreement, bilateral power trade agreement has really gone very high, and perhaps today they will ink it on at the level of secretary. Whereas that particular group, which was envisioned in 2011, did not really even form what we talk of, let alone its activities that we might want to see. So what has gone wrong in between 2011 and 2014?
Way back in 1995, when I joined the Indian power sector, people were talking about SARC grid. That there will be integrated SARC grid in this country, in this region, and power will flow through the SARC grid. And at that time also I had said that unless you have a bilateral trade, sustenance of the bilateral trade on a mutually trusted basis, I don't think SARC grid will ever come. So the point I am only making is that that is an intent. The intent has been there for last 20 years that I have been getting. That we should have a SARC market, and which would power would flow freely from one SAARC country to another SAARC country. So that intent is there, and what was reiterated in 2011 in Bangladesh is the intent that we should be able to do it, and we must move towards that. But as I said, that unless there is confidence built up, trust built up through the bilateral trade, I don't think that's becoming a reality. And I am happy that we are moving towards that because of these trades which are now taking place, and trades with Bangladesh, for example, now India supplies power to Bangladesh, and if Bangladesh has any kind of surplus, India will buy that power. So this is not happening, and that is why I think that will lead to that.
One thing in this agreement, so far as we know, very unofficially, Nepal concern is how this agreement is going to impact on the regional power development, not on the bilateral. Because what we have seen is that when you talk about trade or something like that, then other countries would like to regionalize the trade also, because this region is very, very fortunate that every country has got particular source of energy that may complement each other and give a general sort of benefit. So regional power trade really makes sense. But generally what we see that, if you know that on 7th and 8th of October this year, there is going to be World Hydropower Convention in Delhi. And this says only bilateral trade. I don't understand why we are so much suspicious about talking about. We are talking about World Hydropower Convention, and then coming down to say that it should be confined only in the bilateral sort of trade. So that sort of attitude we have to change in order to be more sort of inclusive. And as you know that in nature there are many sources of energy. One is coming from heaven, the other is coming from hell. But the combination of heaven and hell source of energy really gives the optimum generation mix. That everybody, I think, understands. So I don't know what the agreement will say or supposed to say, but we, as Nepali, we have to say, suppose the agreement comes into force, what are the prerequisites that we have to really meet before we jump into the trade? We don't have a regulatory authority, we don't have any mechanism of trade, we don't have infrastructure, so we have to be really careful to meet the challenge of the agreement. Agreement itself, in whatever form it concludes, is a very good thing. It has got to be done, but in the same time we have to be very much conscious of what we have still to do in order to take maximum advantage of that as a trade agreement that is going to be signed today or tomorrow and when. So what I'm saying that to do with this bilateral agreement, which may be a first step, we have to really go to the regional trade agreement that will be beneficial to the whole region. Thank you very much.
I was going to ask you if this agreement will even be done this week, but it sounds like it's already said it is done. So the first question is, will it be signed but not executed, like you were asking? Right? That's the first question. Second is, is that the PTA is going to be now there in place, but do we have all the prerequisite reforms, etc.? Are we ready for it? That is the third question. Second question. Third question is, what's going to be the impact of this PTA in your view? I guess to put it in a different question, more quantitative question, if you had to take a guess, by the end of this decade, by 2020, how much megawatts is going to be flowing across the two countries? And the last question is, will this ETA now between India and Nepal and in the trade between Bangladesh and India inspire the development of a regional grid like you were asking? So, with those questions, closing thoughts.
Yes, it would be great if the power trade agreement is signed today or in the next week or in the next month. I'd be so happy about it. But let's not doubt the intent of this agreement. And, let's not doubt the follow-ups. This has happened very rapidly. We were discussing this for the last 20 years. Now, over the last 6 months, the last 2 months, it has accelerated, the momentum has been gained. There is positive intent on both sides to take this forward. Let's sign the deal first. Obviously, the implementation part is going to be very important, but now that the intent is there, now that the confidence seems to have been restored or built up again, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that this will happen. Right? Second, we are ready for a PTA, but is Nepal ready for a PTA? I think that there are certain things, certain structural issues which are still pending, which will need to be taken up on a war footing, and I think you have already enumerated some of these. We need to have our Electricity Act, we need to have our regulatory commission in place, we need to have a billing policy on utilizing the transmission, NEA's transmission system or a new transmission system through a new transmission company, whether we should be having a power trading company in Nepal, whether we should have a mechanism to sell power within the country or across the border. All these regulatory issues still are pending. But I think now that an essential element of this entire puzzle seems to be going to happen now or very soon, we should start on these other elements on a war footing. So don't expect that there will be no load shedding from tomorrow, but maybe give it a year's time, 3 years' time. Let's take it step by step.
How many megawatts in the next 6 years, flowing across the two countries? One number.
Crystal ball gazing, I think looking at what projects have been planned in Nepal, probably we should be looking at, and especially I look at NEA's new additions, probably about 1,000 megawatts flowing to India in the summer and about 1,000 megawatts flowing to Nepal in the winter.
2,000.
2,000 megawatts.
So last question is, will the PTA and the Bangladesh deal between India and Bangladesh inspire a regional grid?
I think again, I would see this in the context of taking one step at a time. As Mr. Thakur also said, the bilateral arrangements seem to be in place now. Let's give them some time to mature. And if their confidence levels are built up, we may embark on the next step, which is the regional concept.
Let me take the first question first, last question first. That regional trade. I have said that, and I reiterate, I said that first bilateral trade has to mature and that trust will be built up. But let me ask you the question that if Nepal supplies power to Bangladesh, it will have to go through Indian grid. You cannot build a grid by passing India. Right, so it has to go through India. And electrons don't travel from one place to another. It's by distance. Power flows by distance. So therefore, having made this beginning, I don't think that it's very far away when you will have a regional trade, because once there is a connectivity between India and Bangladesh, there is connectivity between India and Nepal. Then if Nepal project wants to sell to Bangladesh, it will be possible. So it is technically possible. Once it is technically possible, once the intent has been there, I don't think there will be any issues involved where people can say, why should this be happening at all? So I see that it will happen, but maybe it will take a little time. Now, coming to how many megawatts can be developed in the next 6 years that you are saying, for either domestic consumption in Nepal or for trade with India, it will be very, very difficult to hazard a guess for anybody, because it's not only the umbrella agreement which is going to make it happen. There are many more things to be done at the ground level, and also the financing of the project will become a major issue. So it will take little time, but at least the door has been opened. At least the confidence has been built up to say that the government have intent, people have intent
to make it possible, and that's a good sign of it. One question was asked that, like any other agreement, the agreement has been signed, let it is signed today or tomorrow. The PTA has been signed. How long will it take to implement? Because I will say there is nothing to implement the PTA. There is nothing in PTA to be implemented. It's only as I said, an instrument of facilitating things and an instrument of saying that look, both India and Nepal want to encourage this trade, and therefore we will not create any hurdles, and some of the hurdles which can be anticipated at this point of time can be taken care of in the PTA, that will not do this, will not do that. And that's what we discussed. So therefore, there is nothing like implementing the PTA. The implementing the agreement that will be signed under this umbrella agreement, whatever you are going to sign, whether it is PPA, PSA, or the financing agreement, those are the things to be implemented, not the PTA to be implemented. So that's another. As far as how many years or months or whatever it will take for the household to get electricity in Nepal, let me tell you, 54% of the households in India do not have access to electricity. Right. So I don't think that it will happen very soon, but I leave it for Mr. Saket to say, because he has to supply power to the households here.
Or will we have a regional or let's say bilateral exchange, which will be one layer on top of the national exchange of India? Will it be that? We have to define that. Right now it is only a matter of conjecture. The Indian exchange right now, they will collect bids and they will sell bids and buy bids and then have a market clearing price. So we can participate there through PTC as far as I understand. After the PTA, we can continue to do that with a guarantee of the rules, or we will have on top of that another bilateral where only it's a bid, buy and sell bid only between cross country. That is the things which has to be answered, and then only it will be executed. But what other structures of bilateral trade? I think, as I said in the beginning also, PTA will set into momentum. I think the unbundling of NEA. I think this is my guess because of the proximity effect, whatever you like to say. And the second question, what immediate benefit of PTA? From a power trading department point of view, we have been doing power purchase agreements with developers with the prediction that we will sell a certain energy of the wet season to India, taking the risk. Right now we already know that we will be spilling that energy, and we have to take or pay the purchase, the IPP. So there is already 2,000 megawatt of PPA which is going to be built by 2017-18 end, and the demand is going to be maximum 1,800 megawatt, and whatever policy intervention is still not going to so drastically change. So we are going to spill energy. We already assumed that there will be a market in India. So, and even that is going to be now is saturated because of this cross-border transmission line between Muzaffarpur and Dalki, which can take maximum 1,000 megawatt as per Grid Code India, and maximum 1150 megawatt as per Grid Code of Nepal, which has to be again harmonized. Which Grid Code prevails? So it will probably be Indian Grid Code, I don't know. Of course, the last is. So this is going to be 1,000 megawatt. Therefore, if this PTA is there, then I think we will be able to finalize the second transmission line, and then we can start having PPAs or take risk with that. In the back of the mind that there is assurance of the market, so we can start and keep it. That's the immediate benefit. And regional grid is going to happen in 2015 September. But physically connected, I mean. Bangladesh, Bhutan is already there, and Nepal, and India. But how about operation? That's what I was talking to Mr. K. Thakur in the morning also. That will take some time. It will take some confidence building and trust between the countries, also political environment, all that. It will take some time, I think. And about the amount of power energy, from my estimates, 2000 megawatt is going to be available with certain degree of volatility for certain projects, like right now about 1250 megawatt, let's say about 1750 megawatt PPA. Out of that, we are seeing that about 1250 are in progress, but 500 are nowhere. They are not known. So assuming that kind of rate for all those PPAs, we think about 2000 megawatt will be available. Out of that, 1000 megawatt we have to sell during wet season. And during dry season, we need more, 1200 megawatt. But in terms of energy, we will be selling more than importing, because the wet season there will be a longer period. So I guess it is about 2000 gigawatt hour during the wet season, selling off and buying anywhere between 1000 to 1500 gigawatt hour in the winter. So there will be net surplus of energy trade. That's my guess. And that is apart from those three projects, the Upper Karnali and the Upper Mustangli and Arun 3. Those three, if they come together by 2020, they will have 2700 megawatt or something. And out of that, taking apart those meant for Nepal, and they will be still able to sell over 2200 megawatt.
With that very reasonable summary, I would like to thank my three panelists for being extremely patient and bearing with me. Dr. Shah, Mr. Thakur, Mr. Sakya, thank you very much. And if you could please join me in giving them a round of applause.
यो रुमको पेसेन्स र यहाँको इस्युजहरू हेर्दाखेरि साँच्चै यसमा अझ हामीलाई अरू डिस्कसन र यो इस्युले एउटा मिनिङफुल गति लिएको जस्तो फिल भएको छ र आई वुड लाइक टु पिक अप फ्रम द पोइन्ट वेयर विशालजी से इट्स अ किक स्टार्ट. अब इडिसीले यो आज एउटा हामीले यस्तो दिनमा एउटा प्रोग्राम गऱ्यौँ. यो एउटा संजोगै थियो भने पनि सुखद संजोग हो कि कमसेकम एउटा यत्रो लामो समयदेखिको पिटिएको इस्युज उहाँले भन्नुभयो, सुन्नमा आयो, यो चिज रियलाइज हुँदैछ र यो कार्यक्रमलाई हामीले अवश्य पनि एउटा निरन्तरता दिने नै छौँ. फ्युचरमा पनि यस्तो प्रोग्रामहरू, किनभने यी चिजहरू गरेर एउटा आज त स्टार्ट मात्रै हो र यसबाट एउटा चिज सर्टेनली के इस्टाब्लिस भएको छ भने इडिसीले पिकअप गरेको इस्युज एकदम रिलेभेन्ट र एउटा टाइमली उसमा रहेछ. इडिसी स्थापना भएको सायद धेरै दिन पनि भएको छैन, तर एउटा त्यो राइट इस्युलाई लिएर हिँड्न सकेकोमा मेरो विचारमा यो इडिसीको एउटा राम्रो हो जस्तो लाग्छ, राम्रो एउटा सुरुवात हो जस्तो लाग्छ. अब यत्रो उसमा आएर यत्रो पेसेन्सली सुनिदिनु भयो र यत्रो कन्ट्रिब्युसन गरिदिनु भयो, त्यसमा म यहाँ सबैलाई इडिसीको तर्फबाट हार्दिक धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु. In the meantime, I would like to extend our special thanks to Mr. Thakur. You have accepted our invitation and come all the way to share so many important views and thoughts. अब यसका साथै हाम्रो एक्सक्लुसिभ मिडिया पार्टनर एभिन्यूज टेलिभिजनलाई पनि म विशेष धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु. त्यस्तै नेपाल च्याम्बर अफ कमर्सलाई पनि म विशेष धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु. र अन्त्यमा आज आफ्नो विचारहरू राखिदिनु भने हाम्रो पार्टिसिपेन्ट डिस्टिङ्ग्विस उहाँहरूलाई चाहिँ स्पिकर्सहरूलाई एउटा सानो टोकन अफ अप्रिसिएसन दिनलाई चाहिँ म यसको इडिसीको चेयरम्यान सुजित आचार्यजीलाई पनि आमन्त्रण गर्न चाहन्छु. In the end, welcoming with a big round of applause, EDC. So yeah, अब आजको यो कार्यक्रम हामी यही अन्त गर्छौं र I would like to invite you all for high tea and have a great evening. Thank you.